the difference is for Iowa State, they have that 6th win. They are going to be playing in a bowl game. Kansas does not. And as we talked about last week, and I think we've talked about it really for the past couple of weeks, going back to the Arizona game, this is probably your best chance if you're Kansas to do that, because Utah going into town on Black Friday doesn't exactly scream winnable game that's going to get you to bowl eligibility. So this is kind of your chance if you're Kansas. Pay heed all who enter and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. Busy week for us. We had the Champions Classic on Tuesday night, Kansas and Duke. If you're looking for our live reaction show to that, you can find it on YouTube. You can also find it on our audio platforms, Apple and Spotify, where we spent some time talking on Tuesday night after the game between Kansas and Duke. We'll talk a little bit more probably later in the week about Kansas going forward, as they'll have the Players Era tournament heading into Thanksgiving next week, and so on and so forth. So if you're looking for some more KU basketball content, go ahead and check out our previous show talking Duke and Kansas at the Champions Classic, where we broke all of that down. On today's show, we're going to be talking about KU football, because Kansas is still fighting for bowl eligibility. They will be taking on Iowa State in Ames on Saturday. It's an 11 a.m. kick. Although I've seen the weather forecast, looks like it's going to be a nice day in Ames, which I think, you dodge a bullet there, because I think we talked about this last week, but you see a game against Iowa State in Ames and it's late November and you think, oh, it's going to be like 20 degrees, 20-mile-an-hour winds. Like, the weather's going to be brutal.
The wind hits that stadium in a way that the wind hits few stadiums in the Big 12. I think K-State can get fairly windy. Texas Tech's the other one, but Texas Tech, you don't usually have like the cold wind you get, obviously, when you go to Ames.
Yeah, so Kansas will be in Ames on Saturday morning, 11 a.m., which, by the way, we will be live reacting to that game as well on Saturday afternoon. So that gives you a good reminder that you should be subscribed on Apple and Spotify and on our YouTube channel, because our YouTube channel is where we do our live shows. So if you subscribe on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, you'll be notified when we go live on Saturday afternoon. You can come join us, come hang out with us and other great KU fans, join the conversation, have a good time. And all in all, it's been a lot of fun doing those so far this season, and we only have for sure 2 left. Now we'll dive into the conversation about whether or not there may be a third in terms of a bowl game. That may be something up for discussion over the course of this show. But Kansas is coming off the bye week. They are 5-5. They are facing an Iowa State team that is also coming off of a bye week, and Iowa State is 6-4. And this is, Kevin, an interesting Iowa State team that I think has a lot of interesting storylines surrounding them. They start the year in Ireland. They win the Farmageddon matchup against K-State in Ireland, and that kind of propelled them to a pretty strong start to the year. They beat South Dakota. They end up winning the Cyhawk against Iowa in a close game. They almost lose to Arkansas State, but they get that win. They handle Arizona pretty easily back in late September in Ames. They're sitting at 5-0, and they look like they're guaranteed to be a pretty major Big 12 title contender. And then the wheels started to fall off for them. They have dealt with a ton of injuries that we'll talk about over the course of this show as well. They got down big against Cincinnati. They fought back and almost actually won that game on the road. But that started a 4-game losing streak for them. They lost a bad one against Colorado. They lost against BYU at home. Then they played Arizona State at home and lost. And then they had a weird game against TCU that they probably should have also lost. TCU is like the worst, best team I've ever seen. Like it feels like they should be good and they just suck. I don't know what's up with them. So they come back to win that game basically. So now they're sitting at 6-4. They could have easily been in the same boat as Kansas, where they would have been 5-5 entering this game. Now for Iowa State, the positive news is they finished there with Oklahoma State. So it's not like once they got the 5 wins, I don't know that a bowl eligibility was ever in question for them. But this was obviously, I think, a team and a program that certainly after the way they started the year expected to be in the Big 12 title discussion. That's obviously not the case anymore. What do you make of what Iowa State has been up to this point of the season, and maybe how that translates to this matchup against Kansas?
Just ravaged by injuries. I mean, you mentioned it. Defensively, they've had a lot of guys miss time. that was the case last year when KU, hung a whole bunch of points on Iowa State in a little bit of a surprise result. Ton of defensive injuries and even some injuries, Nick, that aren't getting as much run in terms of Rocco Beck has been playing with a shoulder brace on like the last 3 weeks. And it kind of coincides with Rocco Beck all of a sudden really starting to struggle. And so the bye week came at a good time for Iowa State, not saying that that's going to heal all of their issues. Unfortunately, they do have several of those guys out for the season. Matt Campbell said that, Rocco Beck will continue to play. He's still not 100%. Don't know if he'll still continue to have that shoulder brace on this week. They lose a tight end. They announced this week as well, and that's been a big strength for this team, Nick. When you go and look at their Pro Football Focus grades, they only have 2 wide receivers who hit enough snaps to qualify for the national grades, and a part of that is they play a whole bunch of tight ends. This is not a team that typically, if they're going 4 wide, they aren't all 4 wide receivers, right? Those tight ends are getting out there, but really injuries in the defensive backfield. Caleb Bacon's has been banged up. It sounds like he's going to be back and good to go for this week. But ultimately, it's a shame to see because they had so many injuries a year ago too that kind of dragged them down at the end of last year. But they've really been sort of up against the 8 ball this year when it comes to injuries, sort of up and down that roster, and you hate to see that.
Yeah, and then there was that really kind of weird report that 2 weeks ago after their last game about playing guys with injury, and I don't know, it was kind of weird. It kind of got buried pretty quickly. I don't really know if there was anything more beyond that. They obviously had their bye week. You mentioned Rocco Beck, but yeah, on defense, the real bummer for them is on the defensive side because they had 2 corners that you could make the argument were similar to like a Kobe Bryant, Mello Dotson type with what they had in their secondary with Jontez Williams and Jeremiah Cooper both out for the year. They also lost to Will McLaughlin, who was one of their better linebackers for the year. They've lost a couple safeties as well. Tashawn James was one of their safeties that is out. They've got another safety that might play in Jamison Patton for the game against Kansas. You mentioned Caleb Bacon, another one of their really strong linebackers who's missed some time. Sounds like he might play for Iowa State in this game. And then offensively, you talked about Gabe Burkle, who's the tight end, who was announced that he's going to be out for the year on Tuesday by Matt Campbell. So, yeah, absolutely ravaged, especially on the defensive end. And when you consider the style of defense that they play, in terms of they like to use a lot of safeties and corners, right? With that 3-3-5 style, they like to have a lot of more versatile players out there. They've obviously been really limited in that capacity because of some of the injuries they've dealt with. And so that's certainly the biggest thing with this Iowa State team is they've dealt with so many injuries. This is going to be senior day for them, though. That is something worth noting as well. This will be their last home game, so you figure they'll still be juiced up for it. But you have to wonder just exactly where they're at because you're right. As it pertains to Rocco Beck specifically, I mean, you just look at the raw numbers, Kevin. He's got 12 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, just over 2,000 yards. Like it's nothing impressive for him. And listen, we've watched Rocco Beck over the past several years now at Iowa State, and honestly, I have nothing but respect for him. He's a hell of a player, I think, and nobody can question that kid's toughness or his want to. But there's no doubt that this year has been probably a bit disappointing for him, and I think part of that probably has to do with what you mentioned with the injury that he's dealt with. And so for Iowa State, they also remember this is a team that lost 2 NFL wide receivers, right? And I think that's part of why you see them lean more why you've seen them lean more into utilizing more tight ends because one of their biggest strengths on their offense became one of their biggest weaknesses. They tried to sort of recoup that in the portal a little bit. I remember Chase Sewell at the time was like a pretty big portal get for them, but he hasn't really had that significant of a season for them as a wide receiver. So, yeah, overall,
Townsend's another guy that I think a lot of people thought would have sort of big results this year, and he's played well when he's played, but he hasn't seen the field just a ton. I think he probably has fewer snaps than Cam Pickett, even with all the injury stuff that Pickett's dealt with. And so that's been probably a problem too.
Yeah. And their run game has been, I think, solid. I mean, if you were to look at them basically stack up against the rest of the Big 12, they're pretty much like dead in the middle. Like Iowa State is sort of become the epitome with the injuries they dealt with of like just an average Big 12 team. Like they don't They're not really standing out in any real statistical areas, but they're certainly not anywhere near the top of the conference in terms of what they do, both offensively or defensively. Quite frankly, I mean, just about the only area where I think they've been pretty good at has been on third down conversions. Offensively, they're in the top 6 in the conference there. That's obviously an area that the Kansas offense has struggled with quite a bit over the course of this season. So maybe that could be something to keep an eye on. But yeah, overall, this is going to be it's going to be a tough game, right? Iowa State Ames is never an easy place to play because there's nothing else to do there besides go to a football game, literally nothing, because it sucks. So their fans are going to be there. They're going to be fired up. And again, it is senior day for Iowa State, so this one will mean a little bit more for them. But the difference is, and I want to talk more about this here in the next segment, but just to sort of tease that is the difference is for Iowa State, they have that 6th win. They are going to be playing in a bowl game. Kansas does not. And as we talked about last week, and I think we've talked about it really for the past couple of weeks, going back to the Arizona game, this is probably your best chance if you're Kansas to do that, because Utah going into town on Black Friday doesn't exactly scream winnable game that's going to get you to bowl eligibility. So this is your chance if you're Kansas.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And not that they can't win that Utah game, but you don't want to put yourself into a situation where you have to win that Utah game or you're not going to a bowl game. Utah is a really physical, tough team, really good defensively. It's a really tough ask to go into that game and say, okay, you got to win this one or you don't go bowling. And so that adds another level. Coaches always say the most important game is the next one. Well, this one is the next one, and also it is the most important game because of sort of where it falls on the schedule, the team you're facing, and what you have after this game as well. And so it is an interesting one. Like you said, a lot of storylines with this Iowa State team. I give a lot of credit to Matt Campbell and John Haycock and those guys, because the fact that they've gotten to 6 wins so far, with all of the issues that they've had, I don't think you've seen them take their foot off the gas, right? They've continued to battle and they've continued to be sound, even if the guys that are out there maybe aren't quite as good as the guys that are missing because of the injuries.
Yeah, I mean, look, they played a good game against Arizona State that they maybe could have won. Arizona State looks like a top team. Their resilience in that Cincinnati game that I had a chance to watch that game earlier in the year was pretty impressive. Yeah, so this is definitely a tough team, and people like to crack jokes, myself included, about Matt Campbell and how he's always trying to leave Iowa State, or he can never win, whatever. I have to give him credit, like he's held the team together, especially when you consider after starting 5-0, and losing 4 straight, they could have just kept spiraling and called it a season, right? I mean, You got a report that Sam Levitt is out at Arizona State and wants to transfer, you're reaching that time of year where kids start to look around, players start to look around and say, do I really want to finish this year here, or do I want to just, try to just go somewhere else in the transfer portal, whatever? That you haven't seen that from Iowa State, right? Like they've continued to stick together as a team, and I think that sort of mirrors a little bit of what the culture that Lance Leipold has been
100%.
building and wants to build at Kansas, right? And I think he's talked about that a little bit, how there's a lot of respect there, because Iowa State, kind of similar to Kansas from a certain standpoint, is it's not an easy place to win, right? It's not an easy place to maintain long-term success. And Matt Campbell has maintained success certainly for quite a while there. Not the peak, right? They haven't obviously reached the mountaintop, but they were in the Big 12 title game last year. They've been pretty consistently. You always know it's going to be a tough matchup against them, is really what it comes down to. And, I thought it was funny. Lance Leipold kind of reflected on the fact that, if you remember right, in 2021, in Lance Leipold's first year, Kansas went to Ames and got absolutely curb stomped.
Yeah.
I mean, just destroyed. I think it was 45-0. Kansas didn't have it. There was nothing, right? It was absolutely nothing. And it was sort of one of those moments of, oh crap, this rebuild is going to take a little bit of time. Well, since then for Kansas, they've actually had Iowa State's number. KU's won the last 3 games against Iowa State. So that's something to factor in. We've talked about Lance Leipold off of a bye. Again, I'm men in blacking the K-State game. Doesn't matter. But I will say Iowa State's also coming off of a bye. So does that erase the fact that KU's off of a bye as well if Iowa State also has a bye? So I don't know. It's an interesting game. It's, again, with that Utah game looming, like I don't know if I should call this a must-win game, but I think certainly it feels that way for Kansas if they really do want to go to a bowl game, because if this gives you an indication of where people think Utah is at, they were number 12 in the CFP, so they're right on the edge of potentially making the college football playoff. They've every Big 12 game they've won, Kevin, they've won by 25 plus points.
Yeah.
And they're 17.5 points favorites against K-State, who obviously came into Lawrence and thoroughly thumped KU. So your odds in that game are not going to be great regardless. And certainly if you don't win this one, it feels even more of a Herculean effort will be required in order to compete and maybe even win against Utah.
Yeah, and you talk about two coaches in this one as well that have caught in heat for the way they've played in close games at times. That's been a long time struggle, and Matt Campbell has had some up periods where he's won close games, but generally speaking has struggled in close games. Lance Leipold has had a couple times where he's had solid seasons in one-score games. Generally speaking, I think a lot of people would say that he kind of struggles in one-score games. And so there's so much mirror in this one. And when you hear Lance Leipold and the KU coaches talk about Iowa State, when you hear Matt Campbell and the Iowa State coaches talk about KU, it's very apparent that there's a very real respect there. They meet on the recruiting trail. Both of them, neither one of them is going to probably have a top 15 recruiting class at any point. And so it's all levels of how do I make more with less? And I think that both programs have had a level of success being able to do that through their culture, through the different things that they've done and the way that they develop players. And so in a lot of ways, these two programs are kind of mirror images of each other.
And by the way, Matt Campbell actually had a quote on Tuesday basically saying that he thought KU was like the best team in the conference, which was kind of crazy to hear him say that as well. But I think that goes back to what you said with maybe some of that extra respect factor that these two, I guess, programs have for each other. But on Saturday, it'll be a battle for Kansas to try to get to bowl eligibility. It'll be a battle for Iowa State, as crazy as it sounds with kind of the year that they've had. If Iowa State wins on Saturday, they're looking at 8-4, and 8-4 suddenly doesn't sound too bad for them, considering maybe where they were in the middle of the season with some of what they dealt with. So I want to talk a little bit more about Kansas and what KU can do against Iowa State, maybe some matchup specific stuff and how important this potentially is for a bowl game. Also, I wanted to get to Jalon Daniels spoke with the media on Tuesday. I wanted to play that a little bit to hear some of what he had to say ahead of this game as well. I thought it was interesting and relevant to this conversation also. We'll do all that coming up after this quick break. But this break does give us a chance to remind you that if you are a Chiefs fan, you could be on the field at the 50-yard line inside GEHA Field for the official coin toss at a Chiefs home game this season. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now. Enter for a chance to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score other exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. More KU football talk coming up next.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
This is the Payee Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. In case you missed it, we had a live show following KU and Duke on the basketball court at Madison Square Garden from the Champions Classic, breaking down what we saw from that game for Kansas against the Blue Devils. Jayhawks ultimately lost that game, but highly would encourage you to check out our show on Tuesday night, live reacting to that game. We'll talk more KU basketball later in the week as they're going to be headed to the Players Era in Las Vegas next week during Thanksgiving. And then it'll be back home. They've got a big stretch of games against UConn, Missouri, and NC State coming up in the first 2 weeks of December. So lots of stuff to be discussing there with KU basketball. So if you want to hear more about that, check out our previous show talking KU and Duke. Also, the KU women's soccer team is going to be back in action later this week. They are in the NCAA tournament. They've advanced to the second round. They're playing against Louisville later this week. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. I was out there last Friday for KU's opening round, a matchup against Cal Baptist. Crazy game, by the way. Kansas won 3-1. All four of the goals, it was 3-1. All four of the goals happened in the first half. So it was a bit of a chaotic game, but Kansas got the win, and they are moving on. They're playing at Duke. They'll be playing Louisville in the second round coming up later this week. So cheer on those Lady Hawks also. And I think we mentioned in our last show, but KU women's basketball, big win as well over Missouri over the weekend. So they are getting things going, it seems like, with a big Bordeaux victory for them. So yeah, be sure to support them. And we had an interview with Elle Evans about a week ago now. I would encourage you, even though it was before the Missouri game, I think there was a lot of stuff in there that still would be really interesting for a lot of people. So if you missed that, I would encourage you again to look back at our previous shows and find that and maybe give it a listen to support the KU women's basketball team. Continuing the discussion here with KU football, taking on Iowa State on Saturday. We touched on a little bit there, Kevin, towards the end of the first segment, but obviously bowl eligibility would be huge for this Kansas team. I guess if you want to frame it this way, it sounds somewhat kind of silly to think like, okay, you went 5-7 last year, but if you go 6-6 this year and make a bowl game, it feels much better. But that's kind of where I'm at, right? Like,
yeah,
the difference between the potential for this season to sort of fizzle out and go and KU finishes 5-7 for a second consecutive year, that feels like a real gut punch, I think, for this program, versus 6-6. Let's say if you're able to beat Iowa State and maybe you lose to Utah still, but then you get to go to a bowl game, you get those additional practices, like that would just feel, I think, so much better just from like a vibe standpoint, which like maybe that's kind of silly, but I'm just like, that's just kind of where I'm at, I guess. I mean, how important is it, do you think, that Kansas does get back to a bowl game this year?
Yeah, I think it's huge from a momentum standpoint. I think it's big to be able to take that out on the road when you're looking at the transfer portal and recruiting. And we've talked so much about the bowl practices, but the reason we do is you don't use all of those bowl practices to prepare for your bowl opponent, right? You use some of them to prepare for playing in your bowl. But a lot of them are, hey, let's give Zeke some run with the first team. Let's give this young player, Malachi Curvey is a linebacker that it seems like people are pretty high on. Let's get Malachi Curvey out there for a bunch of reps. And the coaches at KU often talk, Nick, about their 2-huddle system that they kind of use during practices and how that affords them more reps. Well, then multiply that out over all these extra practices, over all these extra reps. And you're giving guys a chance to not just get scout team reps, but get legitimate repetitions that matter, against good competition, against, working with the better players. And so that really helps as well. And don't sleep on the fact, Nick, that if you win, you're 7. You have 7 wins, and that looks a little bit better optically. But the other part is Kansas, and shout out to Ben Hook at the University of Daily Kansan for this. Kansas has only been to 3 bowls in a 4-year stretch once in its history, and that came under Mangino. And so when you look at that, the ability to kind of end with that, and also, I'd love that for. We'll talk about the seniors next week, but I'd love that for Jalon Daniels, for Daniel Highshaw, guys who came in to this program when they did, for Keenan Caldwell, and even for guys who transferred in but have been here for a long time, like Nolan Gorska, Kobe Baines, all the work that those guys have put in to be able to sit there and say, hey, over this period, you went to 3 bowl games in 4 years compared to where the program was right before that, is a pretty big accomplishment and another sort of step forward, I think, from a consistency standpoint within this program as well.
Well, and one of the beauties of college football and the bowl system is that it affords you an opportunity to finish your season with a win, right? Like, that's not something that that really happens in a lot of other college sports. When you think about like basketball, the NCAA tournament, or these other sports, like when you have those tournament style sports, it's basically one team essentially gets to end the season with a win, right? Everybody else has to end the season with a loss. So even it sounds maybe kind of silly, but just the fact that, hey, you have a chance to maybe go into the new year, in December and end the year with a win, able to send off, as you said, the seniors with a win. And those guys deserve it, right, for all the hard work and hard effort they put into it. Jalon Daniels, again, we'll play some audio from what he had to say earlier this week later in the show. And, he was pretty blunt, I thought, about the fact that all the work that he's put in and the effort that he's put in and how much he would love to have the opportunity to finish his Jayhawk career on a high note by going to a bowl game and winning that bowl game, right? So that's something that is very positive. And then on the flip side of that, something that you kind of alluded to as well is it's hard at this time of year not to start to peek towards the future. And we look towards the future, this Kansas team is going to have a pretty significant quarterback battle on its hands, we think, heading into spring, right? Those extra practices in December may help with that, may help, those guys continue to build towards that, right? You're going to have to be starting to look at your running back room is going to look a lot different next year because you'll lose Leshaun Williams and Daniel Highshaw, right? Like you're going to lose some receivers. Your defense has a lot of young guys, but you are going to lose some players off that side of the ball too. So you start to look ahead and think, like you said, can we get some young guys going a little bit here in late December before spring ball to help sort of springboard ourselves into that and going forward. So, it's really twofold, I think, if KU can do that. Let's talk about how they get that done, though.
Sure.
Specifically against Iowa State. Iowa State, they run that 3-3-5 tricky defense. We'll start there. This offense for Kansas has been really good at times, but they've also really struggled, especially in the second half of games. And Jim Zebrowski talked about that this week. You think about the Arizona game where Kansas had some opportunities and ended up not being able to capitalize. There's been other games where that's been the case as well when they've lost. I even think back to the UCF game, Kevin, where if the offense puts together one drive, that game suddenly feels much different than maybe the stressfulness that was involved with it late in that one. So I don't know. Where do you see this offense for Kansas trying to attack Iowa State with a lot of the injuries they have there, and how successful can this offense be?
Yeah, last year's game was a little bit of an outlier, I think, because of all the injuries that Iowa State had. And typically, Kansas has struggled to run the ball on Iowa State. And they're a big part of that is the way that Iowa State runs its defense. Like you said, it is tricky. Typically in the past, you've had really strong defensive ends. I think Peterson was one of their guys, 4 or 5 years ago. It was almost comical to watch on tape because he would line up over your tackle, and if you ran wide zone to his side, he would basically tackle your running back with the offensive tackle. Like, that was how strong he was. And so they ate up your 5 offensive linemen with their 3 guys. And the other part of that, Nick, is because of that, it's really tough for you to block everybody because you're losing those individual matchups. And then linebackers are free to flow to the ball. They tackle so well in the secondary, and those guys really come downhill and support in the run game. And that's where, when you ask me, hey, where can Kansas maybe get Iowa State? I think you can get them down the field in the passing game. I know that I know that Jim Zebrowski said, hey, they make you drive it. They make you drive it. They do, but at the same time, Kansas has been able to get over the top in key moments against Iowa State in the past. If you look at the game in Ames last time, Kansas hits on, was it LJ Arnold? You connect on the deep ball that kind of changed that game. And then last year, you had several deep shots that you were able to dial up. And so the one thing about that defense and the way they play it is, if you can present some threat of run, or you can get them to a point where those defensive backs are looking run, maybe you can sneak a guy over the top. The issue is you got to hit that. You aren't going to get a ton of those chances, and you have to hit on those chances. Jalon Daniels hit on a terrific throw against Arizona to Emmanuel Henderson that got over the top. We've seen him hit on some of those. We've seen him miss on a few that were pretty big. Are you able to connect on that deep shot when you get it? Because it's not like you're going to get probably 6 or 7 of them with their guy running over the top. It may be 1 or 2. And if you connect on those, then it's a game that you have a good chance to win. I think that's kind of where you get this defense. I think it's going to be tough for Kansas to run the ball again, especially when you look at Caleb Bacon being back. He's a good run defender. Dominique Big Citrus Orange from North Kansas City here, and was a guy that KU was in on. I'm sure that he's going to be very motivated to play well in this game. I think it's a senior game for him as well. And so when you look at what they have up front and at the second level, they're going to make it tough for you to run the ball on them. They're going to be disciplined. So quarterback run game is not going to be something that's going to be super easy to utilize either. I think where you get Iowa State potentially is if you can kind of get them leaning run and then try and hit on something down the field.
Well, and something that's going to add to the challenges for Kansas running the ball, Kevin, is kind of some bad news from Lance Leipold and Jim Zabrowski, basically like openly admitting that one of Daniel Highshaw and Leshai Williams are not fully healthy. Like there was a question asked to Lance Leipold on Monday about that, and he was like, "It's not good. It's not where we want it to be." Right. So that's very frustrating because I was so happy about the Arizona game because, hey, if you were going to have both those guys, Daniel Highshaw and Leshai Williams, fully healthy, sounds like there was some injuries that were picked up in that game or whatever it may be. And Kansas is not going to be at the same level of health heading into this game at the running back spot against Iowa State. So now all of a sudden, I think that throws into question how effective maybe you can be on the ground too if you have one or both of those guys potentially hampered by injuries. So I hate to, there's been times this season where I feel like Kansas has put too much on Jalon Daniels' plate in games and trying to just make him play superhero. But in this game, it feels like maybe you might need that, right? It feels like maybe Jalon Daniels, you might need sort of that level of play from him. And especially if, like you said, you want to try to capitalize down the field.
Yeah, you're going to need him to hit on those downfield shots. But to your point, you're also probably going to need him to play running back for you, right? In terms of you're going to need him to probably have double-digit carries in this one like he did against Arizona. And so
or more Zeke Marshall.
That's another thing. And
throwing it out there.
You're coming off of a bye week where potentially you had a chance to look at some options for how to address these concerns. But I do think it's a game where Jalon's probably going to have over 10 carries. Like if you were giving me an over-under, I would be fairly surprised if he doesn't have that. The key is going to be, hey, what are you able to do off of that? Are you able to strike down the field? Because it's so tough to execute repeatedly against a defense, and it's really, really tough to execute repeatedly against a defense that's as sound as Iowa State does. I think if you had a Mount Rushmore of Big 12 defensive coordinators through the history of the conference, John Haycock's on there. And he's had elite defenses despite Iowa State not recruiting at the level that, in Oklahoma or a Texas or some of these other schools have done. And a big part of the reason is, one, what they do is sound. There's a reason that when Haycock's defense really started taking off, you had all kinds of NFL coaches going to Ames, Iowa to be like, how are you defending the spread? Because you have all these Big 12 teams with 80 billion weapons everywhere, and they're struggling to move the ball on you. What are you doing right? And he was doing it while being under-talented. And so I think when you look at all of that, John Haycock's a legend in this league, and he's done an amazing job. And so that's why I think the big plays are going to be key in this one, is because you probably aren't going to get many chances for explosives, and so you really need to take advantage of the chances you do get.
Defensively, Kansas had maybe one of its best games of the season against Arizona. Yep. It felt like, with what they were able to do, obviously besides the last drive where you give up the game-winning touchdown, but prior to that, it felt like they'd done a really nice job against Arizona. You've had the bye week now. When you look at this KU defense, what are you expecting from them? I mean, I don't know. Like, is it reasonable to just assume that they're going to continue what they showed against Arizona, or is it potentially going to be more of what we've seen kind of the rest of the season, where they have some issues against an Iowa State team that is, as we talked about earlier in the show, is quite a bit different from most Big 12 teams that you'll face in the sense of what the type of personnel that they use. So I don't know. What are you expecting to see from this defense?
Yeah, I think a lot depends on what Rocco Beck you get, right? Because if he's in a shoulder brace and is still struggling to throw the ball, who's like 9 for 24 or something like that against TCU in the game that they won. And so if you're knowing as a defense that, hey, you find out in the first quarter, Rocco Becht isn't throwing this thing well. We're going to be able to line up and stop the run. Then it changes what you do, because what they did against Arizona, they got beat by the run at times. They wound up giving up a whole bunch of yards per carry, and Arizona had some explosives. There were also some negative plays built in there, but I think that's the thing that you want to do better in this one, is eliminate the explosives that Iowa State gets in the run game. But I think the other part of it is if Rocco Becht is struggling to throw the ball, maybe you're able to put an extra guy in the box. Maybe you're able to have a little bit more help there with what you're doing. And so I do think that defensively, it's tough to say, hey, you can just plan on being as good as you were against Arizona. But there were some really encouraging things that I do think you can take forward in this. One of which, Nick, I thought they generated pressure really well. And when you look at this Iowa State team, I think they're good in sort of the middle three. They've got a good center. The guards are pretty good. They're a little bit more questionable at tackle. And so when you look at some of the things that Kansas did against Arizona, I thought it was interesting DK McDonald bringing up the Dak Brinkley sacks as second effort plays and sort of working off the initial block. We saw Jalen Todd blitzing and getting home. And so maybe you're able to do some of those things to create pressure and get stops, because I would much rather see this defense played that way as opposed to what we've seen earlier, where it was sort of death. But you can't even call them paper cuts, because they were still getting gashed while being a little bit more passive. Whereas I think the way that this defense generates stops, or has a chance to generate stops, is by being aggressive, either putting yourself into a position to generate a turnover. They had multiple chances against Arizona, obviously didn't come to fruition on a few of those, but you had the chances there to generate turnovers. And the other thing is just generating negative plays, right? If you're able to stop a run where Iowa State all of a sudden is in 2nd and 13 and it kind of puts them behind the chains, that helps. If you can sack Rocco Becht and bring up a 3rd and 15, that helps. And so all of those, that aggression on defense, I think, is something that I'm hoping that they carry over from Arizona to this one.
Yeah, because that, I think, was the biggest difference, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from what we saw from them again in that game versus some games where they have been gashed, like you mentioned, is that aggressiveness. And so why not, right? Play with your hair on fire. Get after Iowa State, right? The one thing I will say is Rocco Becht is not really known as a runner, but he certainly is not afraid to.
Yeah.
So that, I don't want to say that scares me, but I guess just be aware of that, right? That he is capable in that area as well. And yeah, I think there's a real opportunity for this Kansas defense to be aggressive and get after Iowa State. Like, especially if Rocco Becht is not 100%, if you get him into those 2nd and long, 3rd and long situations, that should heavily favor you at that point. If he is not able to maybe make every single throw as well as he could if he's fully healthy, and capitalize on that, right? Like, take advantage of that, put them in bad situations and try to make plays. And for people that I think will be frustrated, and obviously I was frustrated too last two weekends ago against Arizona, when you have near turnovers, or in the case of Leroy Harris, an actual turnover that gets called back by a penalty, right? Like, it's frustrating because it's like, okay, you don't make those plays, right? But the only way to make those plays is to just keep putting yourself in position to do that, to make them, right?
Yeah.
And hope that eventually, one comes your way. And so I think that's got to be, I guess, the mentality for this defense heading into this game against Iowa State. But yeah, this is an Iowa State offense that has also dealt with injuries as well. They're going to be without, again, Gabe Brooklyn, one of their top tight ends. He was their 3rd leading receiver for the year coming into this game. They've got another really good one that DK McDonald mentioned, and Benjamin Bramer, who's been really strong this year. But you should have a chance, I think, if you're this Kansas defense, to put Iowa State into uncomfortable situations, as long as you can successfully stop the run. And this Iowa State offense has not been great on the ground. They're, again, pretty average when you look at them compared to the rest of the Big 12. So you stop that, you put them into situations where they're relying more on Rocco Becht, and see if he can beat you, which that hasn't been the case in some of Iowa State's games so far this season. If you do that, I think you feel okay about where KU's defense is at.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's it's a game that I don't expect to be high scoring really on either end, because I mean, I do have a lot of respect for Haycock, even if they are playing some players down. And on the other side, like you said, I do think that Kansas has the tools, and Iowa State hasn't been terrific offensively to where Kansas can kind of maybe keep this scoreline down. I don't expect this to be a 38-35 game, and we'll obviously get into our predictions a little bit later. I think this is probably one that gets played out in the high teens into the 20s. And so when you look at that, I do think Kansas has enough defensively to slow Iowa State down and make it where Iowa State can't sort of run and hide in this one offensively.
All right, I did mention earlier, Jalon Daniels spoke with the media on Tuesday, and I thought a lot of what he said was pertinent to a lot of the conversation we've had in this show about getting to bowl eligibility and whatnot, and sort of where he's at with this season. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about some players to watch, and we'll share our game picks. We'll do all that coming up next.
Hey, what's up, people? Ben Heisler, KCSN betting analyst. We got some thoughts on KU and Iowa State coming up on Saturday. But before we get to a play, got to ask you, what's your favorite touchdown? I think you're already starting to know the answer, right? The next one. And that's because at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the National Football League, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. Love being able to play on DraftKings. Been doing it all season. And there's so many different ways to get in on some of these touchdown props, whether it's a first touchdown score, anytime touchdown score. If you want to, you could jump on in live action, live in-game betting. That's available for you too. And the best part is new customers who bet just $5. If your bet wins, you can get $300 in bonus bets instantly. So how do we break down this Kansas and Iowa State game? Right now, the Cyclones 4.5-point favorites over at DraftKings Sportsbook with a fairly high total of 55.5. I think this is too high for Iowa State. I like the Jayhawks to cover this number here, possibly even upset them outright. This KU squad, obviously it changes over year to year, but they've had a lot of success against Iowa State, especially over the last 3 years. They mollywopped them at home last year. They've won 3 straight. KU 6-2 off of a bye against the spread since Lance Leipold took over. Since 2022. And for Iowa State, they got back in the win column after losing 4 straight, but they still needed 14 points in the fourth quarter to come back on the road against TCU. So I can anticipate a bit of a slow start here, especially coming off an emotional win for Iowa State. Remember, Jalon Daniels still having an outstanding season. He's just one of 9 FBS players that's got 20-plus touchdowns, less than 5 picks all year. Given his longtime success against Iowa State, and the fact that the Cyclones are a very beatable team this year. Yes, it's at home, and that's part of the reason why the 4.5 is baked in. But I do think Kansas can hang, and I think they will hang for most of this game. I think 4.5 points is too many. Give me the Jayhawks plus 4.5 against the Cyclones on Saturday. So remember, if your team hits pay dirt, that pays out to you. Here's what you do. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use the code KCSN, for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, pass-through of per-wager tax may apply in Illinois. 21-plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. If you've not already, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. If you watch on YouTube, you'll want to be subscribed there because that's how you'll know when we go live for our YouTube live shows. And we will be live on Saturday afternoon following the conclusion of KU and Iowa State in Ames. So 11 a.m. kick, so you can expect us to be live within 15-ish minutes or so after the conclusion of the game. So 10:30 or 2:30, 2:45 time period, depending on how long the game goes. We'll be live. And the best way for you to make sure you know when we're live is to subscribe so you get notified. Do that on our YouTube channel. You can join us and many other great KU fans. Talk about the game, either celebrate getting to bowl eligibility or commiserate possibly another loss for Kansas. Either way, we'll be there. We'll live, rain or shine, no matter what the circumstances are. We'll be live on Saturday afternoon, and you should join us. And if you're on audio, we appreciate you as well. Be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review and subscribe wherever you get your audio podcasts as well. I mentioned Jalon Daniels spoke with the media on Tuesday afternoon. I wanted to just get into a little bit of what he said because I thought, again, it was pretty relevant to a lot of the discussion around this game and what we talked about on the show. So here's everything that Jalon Daniels had to say when speaking with the media on Tuesday afternoon.
Stretch run, man. Has it hit you yet?
Nah, I wouldn't say it's completely hit me. But, as I've been saying throughout the whole entire year, just enjoying every single moment of it, taking it all in. At the end of the day, I can't really control the salt that's in the hourglass, but I can definitely go ahead and watch it go down, but enjoy every single moment as it does.
Yeah. We were just talking to Nolan about the late bye week. You obviously had 3 this year, but the late one.
Yeah.
They all help, I'm sure. But,
100%.
But is there any added bonus to the late one, that especially when you're trying to make that late push and get that 6th win? Did it bring any extra motivation or juice for you guys?
I mean, I wouldn't see anything extra. The bye week is always going to be, not only great for a mental break, be able to, take a step back, but also be able to, get an extra week of preparation. I think it does a lot for the body, for the body. It does a lot for the physical aspect of being able to play the game. And, of course, you're not taking a complete break from football, but you're not going into a game Saturday and completely banging every, you feel me, every single play. But I think it's definitely allowed us to be able to, get some guys healthy, be able to make sure that we're going into this week mentally prepared.
This is 2 years in a row, man. After some injuries throughout your career, you've been durable, and you talked about that whole bulletproof thing and all that. How much pride is there from you in what you've been able to do from that standpoint these last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. Obviously not really getting the immediate win-loss ratio result that I would want per se, but at the end of the day, when you really look at it, there was always a lot of question about things of that nature, and that's one thing within this game that you have no control over. You can do everything right, do everything that you can to be able to stay the way that you are, but at the end of the day, things happen, and for me, it's been very big on being able to make sure that my relationship with God has been good, and being able to thank Him every single day for waking up, being able to get another opportunity to be able to play the game that I love, but also being able to say that He's putting my body in His healing hands, and just being able to have faith within Him to do everything that I'm doing, and it's been great. To answer your question, I'm very excited to be able to go out there and play every single Saturday, especially as you said, the hourglass is kind of running down.
For you guys during this past bye week, you got Saturday, Sunday off. I know you're part of the leadership council. What was that kind of discussion like with Coach Leipold and the coaching staff about maybe getting some time just where you guys can reset away from the facility before a stretch run like this? Yeah, I
mean, I think that, you never really want to, how do I say that? You don't want to never butt heads and, try to say a different way of how things should be going. But, when at the end of the day, Coach Leipold has always asked for leadership council's opinion on everything. And that's something that we felt that as a team would be best for us, especially being able to get a mental preparation for going into these last 2 regular season games. We know that these last two games of the year is big for us. So trying to be able to go into the week, like I said, as mentally and physically prepared as possible. But some guys, want that Saturday to as a break for football. For me, I like watching football. I want to be able to see all the other games that are happening around the nation, and I wish I was able to see Iowa State and be able to have that type of view. But for a guy like me, I love to watch the game. I love to be able to watch some of the top prospects, some of the guys who are making noise every single Saturday, and that's exactly how I spent my Saturday.
So you were here.
Yeah, I got the chance to be able to watch some football, man. You gotta love that.
You mentioned Iowa State. You've been around that program for a while in Kansas City's last handful of years. What do you think about that team this year?
At the end of the day, first of all, Coach Campbell has always been somebody who's, able to do a lot at Iowa State. He's had a lot of success there, and, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's Iowa State, and we know that they come in ready to try to come win a football game every single week. So I've never been someone to look at, the past, whether things are going negative or positive in the past. I'm never looking at the past, because at the end of the day, we got to play a game today. And you got to go out there and be able to prepare for another game like it's another game. It doesn't matter who was playing last year, who you're going against. At the end of the day, it's a new football game.
What about their defense? Just anything stick out to you?
At the end of the day, when we're talking about defenses, they're one of the defenses that when I got to college, I was always like, oh my God, a 3-3-5 defense. They have three safeties high. I've never seen anything like that before coming into college. So, having the ability to be able to, disguise whenever they want, be able to have multiple different coverages with those three safeties, they're able to do a lot of things. And I think that they've been doing a lot of things well that way, especially in the secondary wise. And they do a good job of being able to disguise things and be able to make a lot of plays all over the ball. So.
Staying on those three high safeties with that rover, obviously this isn't your first time going against that. What's your comfort level going against that, especially since KU's had Iowa State's number over the last couple of years?
I wouldn't say that there's like a comfort level. At the end of the day, I'm going to treat Iowa State as if they're another team and go watch film, because at the end of the day, just because you're going another three safety high defense does not mean that they do the same thing as they did previously, same thing that they did last year, same thing that another three safety high team that did what they did earlier this year. So you have to be able to look at what they've been doing this season, be able to try to get keys of what they've been doing. And one thing I'll say about Iowa State is they've been doing a good job on film of not giving too many of those. So you just got to be able to get a deep dive of how they are going to try to approach you, see other quarterbacks that they went against, see how they try to play them, and kind of be able to mix and match it from there.
I asked some of the other guys about this. I mean, obviously you got to keep the main thing, but still you're looking for that 6th win, right? You're looking for that bowl eligibility. Is that something that's talked about in the locker rooms, or are you just like, hey, let's focus on just winning the game and then we can talk about bowl games after that?
I mean, you never want to get too far ahead of yourself, and you never want to harp on the past. So, like you hear from almost every player, we focus on the day-to-day things. At the end of the day, you can't win a game in one play. You can't win a game in one day. So, we try to focus on the day-to-day, everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, because we never know what the one little thing is that will help us win the game or lose the game. So I'm sure you heard the guys say that they're trying to focus on everything that they can right now, and they never want to get too far ahead of themselves.
That was Kansas quarterback Jalon Daniels speaking with the media on Tuesday, and again, pretty blunt, I think, in some circumstances with what he had to say as it pertains to his career and this season, and hoping to finish on a strong note heading into this game against Iowa State. So hopefully he plays well. I would love to see that for him. We spent a lot of time talking about Jalon Daniels, especially around the K-State game and what his legacy might be. And, whatever it does end up being, however people reflect on his career, I think that nobody can question his dedication, his commitment, and his willingness to stick it out here at Kansas and really try to be a part of something as KU, builds from being one of the worst programs in the country. And Jalon Daniels certainly has been a part of that, even if necessarily the wins haven't been there for him, necessarily the marquee wins, I guess I should say. But I'll be rooting for him on Saturday, and I hope that he plays well for KU and gives them a chance to win. Speaking of Jalon Daniels, let's just roll that right into our players to watch for this game against Iowa State. Let's just start on the offense, since I just talked about Jalon Daniels. Who are you watching on the KU offense heading into this game against Iowa State?
I feel like we've talked a lot about why Jalon is important in this game, and so I'll go actually with somebody different, even though it probably is Jalon that you're really going to have a lot of time watching. I'm going to go with a little bit of an unexpected guy, and that's Bryson Canty. And the reason that I'm going to go with Canty is I think whenever you think about this Kansas receiving core getting over the top on somebody, you tend to think about Emmanuel Henderson. And at this point in the year, I think when opposing defenses think about who's going to get over the top of them, they think about Emmanuel Henderson. And so it's sort of line item one, do not let this guy get open deep. And the fact that he's still able to get, open in some of those circumstances is a testament to his speed and how good he is. But I think some of the times you've seen KU have some explosive plays down the field, it's been other guys, right? You look at Levi Wentz against Missouri. I think Bryson Canty, since he's continued to get healthy, has given them something a little bit down the field. You've had Cam Pickett, catch the odd explosive play as well. I think Bryson Canty is a guy that has a chance to do what Quentin Skinner did a year ago against Iowa State, which is kind of maybe catch that double move occasionally against this defense, have something down the field. And if Canty has the sort of game that we know he's capable of, and Nick, we've talked about it, if he was healthy all camp, and especially if he had come in during the spring and then was healthy all camp, he probably would have been competing for that sort of wide receiver one spot. He has that level of ability. And so I really look at if Bryson Canty, if we're looking back after the game, he has something like 5 catches for 80 yards or something like that. I think it's going to be a pretty good indicator that Kansas did enough offensively to win this football game.
I'm also going to go with the wide receiver, and I was curious if you were going to pick Emmanuel Henderson or not, because you waxed poetic about beating Iowa State over the top earlier in the show, and I figured, okay, well, Emmanuel Henderson, that makes sense. You didn't go with him though, so I was going to go with Cam Pickett, but I'll take Emmanuel Henderson because you didn't take Emmanuel Henderson. Yeah, Emmanuel Henderson, obviously, as you said, despite the fact that sort of the book is out on him in terms of opposing defenses understand we have to take away this guy for down the field, he has still put himself in position to make plays down the field down the stretch here. The K-State game, he was open a couple times and Jalon just missed him. He had the play against Arizona. There was another play against Arizona. It was a 3rd down in the 4th quarter where he got open on a corner route and they didn't convert it. But he's still able to, get open and create opportunities because of the level of speed that he possesses. And so I'll still be keeping an eye on him, because and also I think he's to the point now where you don't have to hit him, more than a couple times for him to make his impact felt, right? All it takes is one deep shot, and if you convert, it's a touchdown. We've seen that happen in some of the earlier games. So I'll be keeping an eye on him. Again, I just think for Kansas, kind of like we outlined earlier, it's probably going to be a bit of a struggle for them to traditionally just line up and run the football with some of the injuries they're dealing with and just sort of the history against Iowa State in terms of what Iowa State can do stopping the run. So you're going to need other receivers and Jalon Daniels to probably step up in this game and make some plays. And I think they can do it. As you said, Canty's really good. I don't think you'll meet anybody that's a bigger fan of Cam Pickett than myself. And that's why I picked him anyways, despite not picking Emmanuel Henderson. But then obviously Emmanuel Henderson too. This feels like an opportunity for another game where they can, do really well. Because again, this Iowa State secondary is quite depleted. Their top 2 guys are out. They've got several safeties that are going to be out as well. They've got another safety that might not play. So that should be the green light, especially if you're Emmanuel Henderson. Go out and make a play, make a couple plays, and make something happen.
Yeah, I like that pick because, like I said, like the KU wants to get the ball to Emmanuel Henderson. Iowa State wants for KU to not get the ball to Emmanuel Henderson. He still gets open on those plays, and so if Jalon connects on 1 or 2 of those, that could be a major difference in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, who is somebody on the KU defense you've got your eye on?
Yeah, this is tough because I wanted to go with the defensive tackle because I feel like Kansas stopping the run and especially stopping the interior run is going to be a major factor in this one. But the defensive tackles haven't ever been the issue, have they, Nick? When you look at whether KU has stopped the run or not, it's either been a second level issue or it's been an edge issue or even it's been a defensive back not reacting well enough. And so I was going to go with the defensive tackle, but the more I thought about it, I'm going to go with somebody different. And I'm even going to go away from the run game a little bit in that I'm going to go with Jalen Todd. And the reason why is Jalen Todd is going to have a lot on his plate this game because he is going to be counted on to help in the run support I just talked about. He's going to have to probably defend tight ends like Ben Bramer at times. And we've seen Jalen Todd start to make noise as a pass rush guy even as well. And we saw a year ago, once KU figured out like, hey, Marvin Grant's pretty good at rushing the passer, you started to see that quite a bit more. And they were already using Jamie Brown in that and our new defensive coordinator or whatever else. I'm just saying when you find a way to rush the passer, you don't tend to go away from what's working. And so I think Jalen Todd's going to have a lot on his plate. He's going to be asked to cover. He's going to be asked to cover tight ends. He's going to be asked to have run support. He's going to be asked probably to pressure the quarterback here and there. And so I'm going to go ahead and pick Jalen Todd as a player to watch just because I do think there's going to be a lot on his plate, and he's a heck of a football player and just seemingly keeps getting better and better.
I am going to go with a defensive tackle, so I'm glad you didn't. I am going to the interior. I'm going to go with Blake Harold. He's a guy that you and I think both really love in terms of what he's been able to do. He's been maybe one of KU's best pass rushers from the interior as a defensive tackle. And also, he's an Iowa native. He's from Iowa. He's from Shenandoah, Iowa, which, funnily enough, I interviewed for a job in Shenandoah, Iowa, like 6 years ago. But I'm kind of glad I didn't take it because I don't think I would have been very happy there. No offense to the people.
You could have covered Blake Harold.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No offense to the people of Shenandoah, Iowa. I'm sure it's a great place.
I thought it was interesting. I don't mean to cut you off on your pick, but we did talk to Blake Harold this week. And one of the things that I asked him was, how many of the Iowa State players he knew. The answer was actually not that many because he's from Shenandoah, Iowa, and he's like, not a lot of big time football players coming from my part of the state. And so you would have thought, hey, Division I guy pops in Iowa, he's going to know like all of the Cyclones from Iowa. Not actually the case.
Well, and for those that are maybe unfamiliar with geography, Shenandoah, Iowa it's in far western Iowa. If I'm not mistaken, it's like practically on the border with Nebraska, I think, and where it is. And obviously Ames is much farther to the east. And so that probably is part of it as well. But I did think that was funny too. But even still, Iowa native, he's got to be an extra chip on his shoulder heading into this game. So I'm going to keep an eye on him. And again, obviously he's been one of KU's best pass rushers, and this will be a game where he'll have to step up also in the run game as well, I think. So Blake Harold is my pick to keep an eye on in the interior of the KU defensive line. All right, we spent a lot of time yapping about whether or not Kansas is going to make a bowl game. Kevin, they're at 5 wins. They're going to Ames, 11 a.m. kick, tough place to play against Iowa State. Do the Jayhawks get it done?
I think they do. I've been saying for a few weeks now that I felt like this is probably the most realistic win sort of left on the schedule. Blake Harold, by the way, not offered by Iowa State out of high school, at least according to his 24/7 Sports profile. So
should have told him that on Tuesday.
That's kind of an interesting storyline in there. But no, I do think KU finds a way to get this one. I don't know if I would have felt that way if Iowa State wasn't depleted from injuries. And even with Iowa State being depleted, this is not going to be an easy game. If you're looking at the injury report and you're saying, oh, KU by 3 touchdowns, I have some swampland to sell you because I do not actually believe that's going to be the case. I think it's, this is still a program that battles. You talked about the Cincinnati game and the way that they battled back in that one. You look at the TCU game that they probably shouldn't have won, but still found a way to win. This is a program that has toughness and mettle, and I still like Kansas in this game. I think that Kansas, has the defensive tackles up front to kind of neutralize Iowa State's running game a little bit, especially if guys are a little more gaff sound this week. We don't know how healthy Rocco Becht is, except that it sounds like he's definitely not fully healthy. And I think even beyond that, I think Kansas is very motivated to go to a bowl game. And I think that when you look at the way that they came out and played against Arizona, that level of effort would probably be enough to get them a win on Saturday. And so when I look at this game, Nick, I have KU 27, Iowa State 21. I think like I said, I think it's going to play out in sort of those high teens to into the 20s. And so I think KU does get a victory, does get to bowl eligibility, which should make for a much, much, much more pleasant, senior day for a lot of these seniors.
Yeah, one thing we didn't talk about yet on this show is one of the other kind of very interesting things that Lance Leipold mentioned on Monday during his press conference is he actually just came out outright and said, I made the wrong decision against Arizona on the 4th and 2. Like, he came out and said that he should have gone for it. And so if you want to look at that from the optimistic standpoint, maybe it is, Lance Leipold basically acknowledging like, okay, I need to be more aware of, the decisions that I'm making and am I, I want to make sure that I'm giving my team the best chance to win and I need to make those decisions. And so this is an opportunity maybe for him to do that, because as I think you outlined, there's no doubt in my mind this is probably going to be a close game. And if that ends up being the case, you would think, oh boy, that could be a problem for Kansas, because Kansas has lost some of those close games. But I'm going to make a bold prediction that I think there will be a situation in which Lance Leipold will be more aggressive than he has been all season long, and I think that will help lead to Kansas winning the game. I don't know what that situation is going to be. I don't know when it's going to come up. I just think that there's going to be a time where he's going to have an opportunity to be aggressive, and he'll take it this time against Iowa State, and I think it's going to work out. And I'm going to pick Kansas as well. I think Kansas wins 24-17. I'll go 24-17. I think Kansas wins. So, yeah, I would love nothing more than to see this team get to back-to-bowl eligibility. I think for a lot of KU fans, especially after the way the K-State game unfolded, I think there were some people that just kind of were like, threw their hands up on the season, really. And to a certain extent, I understand that. And I almost felt the same way similarly. If you go back and watch our live show after the KU K-State game, I felt a little bit similarly at the time. But even still, I really want to see some of these guys that have been in this program for an extended period of time, that have been here basically from the beginning of this buildup that Kansas has had since Lance Leipold has taken over. There would be nothing that would make me more happier than to see those guys have the opportunity to, and then hopefully go on to win a bowl game to cap off their careers at Kansas. I think that would be a really special thing for them, for Jalon Daniels, Daniel Highshaw, the guys that you mentioned earlier as well, Kevin. So that's my hope, and I think they're going to have that opportunity with a win on Saturday against Iowa State. So I am also picking the Jayhawks.
Nice. Yeah, it'll be an interesting game to watch, just because I do think it's going to be a close game. I expect there to be some momentum shifts, and we'll find out just how healthy both programs are coming off the bye, I guess, with KU's running back situation, with Rocco Pact, with Caleb Bacon, being cleared to play, with Iowa State having a safety still up in the air. All of these are things that, as we're shooting this thing on Wednesday afternoon, we don't know just yet. But at the same time, I think you're going to see two programs that have a lot of backbone to them kind of scrapping it out in this one. And ultimately, I think KU does get it done.
And this is your weekly reminder to not pay attention to the availability reports. They're stupid. They're dumb. They don't mean anything. Only look at who's out. Who is out is significant. Don't look at anything else. It's all dumb. It doesn't matter. I don't pay attention to it. We're excited for this game. Saturday afternoon, we will be live for our post-game show on our YouTube channel. So again, if you subscribe on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, you can be notified when we go live on Saturday afternoon following this matchup between KU and Iowa State. And yeah, hopefully it's a cheery post-game after Kansas goes into Iowa State and secures bowl eligibility. That would be, I think, a pretty exciting thing. But even if it's not, we'll still be live, and then you can come in there and say, oh, wow, you were optimistic about, Lance Leipold being smart. Oh, idiot. Well, then that's on me, I guess. I don't know. You can do that too if it comes down to it on Saturday afternoon. But we hope you'll join us regardless for our post-game show on Saturday on YouTube. But until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again on Saturday. See ya.